in various shapes, forms, and sizes. The easy way is to get overwhelmed by these challenges, and the winner's way is to up the game. My story is a story of struggle with relentless zeal against whatever obstacles life threw my way, regardless of the circumstances. Today, in the spirit of Robert Frost, Dust of Snow, I come here in the hope that my story serves as an inspiration to others to rise up and face their own challenges head-on. On 19 January 2001, in a remote town in Chhattisgarh, my parents had an unpleasant surprise waiting for them. The happy occasion was my birth, and the sole hint of the surprise, bizarre squinting on my part. Concerned, my parents went to the local doctors, who reassured them that sometimes infants squint for the first year or so. But in due course, a second opinion had to be sought, which landed us at the doors of AIIMS, New Delhi. And it was here that the surprise was finally revealed when I was diagnosed with labor congenital amaurosis. I would never be able to see like other children. My lovely parents shuttled from one hospital to another in desperate search of a cure, but it all came to naught. Finally, we decided that if life gives you lemons, then you make lemonade. But under such circumstances, it turns out actually making the lemonade is quite the Herculean task. Well, I did get the lemonade in the end, so I suppose you can call me Hercules now. I was grasping in the dark back then, both literally and metaphorically. There wasn't any such thing as accessible education around where I lived, and even my parents didn't know what accessible education might look like. My parents had several novel and, in retrospect, pretty impractical goals at reinventing the wheel regarding education of the visually disabled. They bought a set of plastic letters and set about teaching me what they looked like. It's a different matter that they could only find a set of plastic capital letters, and so to this day, I only know the shapes of the capital versions. They even set up an elaborate system for reading, buying a scanner, desktop, and printer, so they could scan my books and magnify the letters to ludicrous sizes so I could see them on the screen. They even supplemented the letters with photos to identify them, like a photo of a cat for C. But as you can probably guess, none of this was readily usable for day-to-day reading and writing in real life, especially because any letters I drew were gigantic monstrosities as large as your hand. My parents realized that this wasn't working and, being the fantastic parents that they are, uprooted their entire lives and shifted to New Delhi, where I got admitted into DPS Arkipuram. A war, metaphorically speaking, was on, and we were an army going to battle. Even our residence was not picked for proximity to the workplace or school, but for proximity to an organization to help the visually disabled. Each day, after school or on weekends, 6-year-old me would go to this organization to learn how people like me could read and write. And it was here that I learned how to operate a computer using text-to-speech software and began reading and writing in earnest. Ever since then, my computer has been like an additional organ for me. A few years later, my father had to shift to Navi Mumbai for a job, and I had to seek admission in a new school there. I still recall the day that I came all armed and prepared to write the entrance exam for DPS Narul, Navi Mumbai, and the school refused to even let me write their exam, explaining that they didn't have lighting in the corridors, as if that was an adequate explanation. My parents moved heaven and earth and brought tremendous pressure to bear upon the principal, but he wouldn't budge an inch. Finally, when the pressure grew too great for him to resist, he said, "Okay, take admission, but I won't take responsibility for your problems." My mother is an MSW and one of the most capable people I have ever met. She has always been an outspoken advocate of women's empowerment and pursuit of their own careers. But because of me and my unusual needs, she left her job so that she could assist me with the million tasks that sight makes trivial and to stay around me in school. She obtained a B.Ed and became a teacher, and her being a teacher helped me secure admission into DAV Nerul. Though mind you, I more than made it worth the school's time to have me. In Class 6, I won Hindustan Times 50 Brightest Minds Scholarship of Rs 50,000. I still fondly remember the felicitation with my entire class and half the school present and wildly cheering me on like you guys, and Shah Rukh Khan himself sitting in the audience watching me on the stage. In 11th and 12th, I wanted to pursue science stream, and the school I was in then, not being particularly exceptional in this regard, we decided to shift to New Delhi and get admitted into TPS Vasant Kunj. But much to my chagrin, the moment the school learned that I was visually disabled, they refused to even provide the admission form for science stream. And that could have been it. But to my very great fortune, while returning, I ran into the principal's secretary and told her about my scholastic record and other achievements and requested that my case be reconsidered. She was an angel. She went to the principal, and the principal being a reasonable woman, I was finally provided with the form a day before the exam. My next challenge was arranging for a scribe to write the exam under my dictation. I went from school to school in growing desperation, but was unsuccessful in securing a scribe. Finally, much like a Bollywood movie, I was rescued by an old acquaintance in a flight who agreed for his daughter to scribe for me. And so I finally wrote the exam, only for a new problem to pop out of nowhere. It appeared that I was near the top in the exam, and so the school authorities had concluded that the scribe must have been from a higher class. They had to be put in touch with her school so that they could inquire about her, and only then would they put their suspicions to rest. But then finally, they accepted me with open arms, and I have to say that as a student, they were always willing to accommodate my unusual needs and always treated me with all due consideration. But these were not the only challenges that I faced during my studies. The most challenging was conversion of books into a computer-readable format. Ordinary people go buy the book from the bookstore, plug and play, start reading. But for extraordinary people like me, converting the book into a readable format is a full-time job. The book has to be ripped apart, scanned through OCR page by page, then manually read through and compared with the original to correct scanning defects, and then finally edited. Even for a graduate of a prestigious IIT like my father, editing one page of calculus would often take hours, but he rose to the task with alacrity and produced something that even today helps many other students. But this system of scanning and editing was overwhelmed during my 12th when the maths guide was too much of a mammoth to convert this way. My father had to read it out loud to me, and I had to remember it all from that one read-through. Writing exams was no less onerous. During exams, I'd be provided with a scribe, a student of a lower class, right under my dictation. But, well, they were from a lower class, and that caused problems. Once, there was an equation that went, and my scribe misunderstood me and wrote, and I got a 0 on an answer that I knew perfectly well. And being from a low class, they would often not understand the symbols of science and maths. Sometimes, if they were free and available, I'd go to their place to have a mock run of exam to deal with such issues. But through all of this, there was always one constant. I was always at the top of my class. My class 10 science board exam, the first paper that year, was one of the most demanding trials by fire that I have ever gone through. For general information, there are 3 sets of the question paper circulated by CBSE. The first is printed with graphics, etc. The second is in Braille, and in the third set, graphical questions are replaced with similar non-graphical questions. When the exam bell rang, I was provided with the Braille set. I explained to the authorities that I don't understand Braille and I need to be provided with the third set. Their response was total bafflement. As far as they knew, there was only the Braille set and the standard set. Just imagine my predicament, a 15-year-old boy writing the first board exam of his life facing 2 options. One, he can't read at all, and the second, he can only read partially, and which requires him to draw graphs that he has never seen before. It would have been so easy to give up, but I consciously reminded myself that it was my battle, mine to win or lose, and persisted, requesting the authorities to contact either my parents or my school. And in the meanwhile, I proceeded with the standard set. Bureaucracies being bureaucracies, they refused at first, but seeing my continued resistance, finally caved, and my parents rushed to the school and explained to the authorities about the third set which I should be provided with. It was finally located and was provided with the correct set 2 hours into the exam. My parents later asked me what the whole experience felt like, and I told them it was like facing death and coming out of it alive. Though on the upside, I did get 10 out of 10 CGPA in the exam. As my school experience drew to a close, I knew that I was approaching a fork in the road. A choice of career on my part has been postponed as much as it could be, but it would finally have to be taken. I had always loved science and maths, and my teachers assured me that I was a shoo-in for a top IIT and should really consider engineering. Meanwhile, friends of my father, who knew about my fondness for analytical reasoning and penchant for starting annoying debates that only I enjoyed, suggested that I should look into law as an option. I knew my priorities. Because I had faced adversity and had to struggle, I did not want others to face adversity or struggle. And so I chose law so that I could stand up for the rights of others and help fight their battles for them. I wrote CLAT, A-Lit, LSAT, and other entrance tests for admission into an integrated BA/LLB course. Through CLAT, I got the option of admittance to Nalsar, Hyderabad. In LSAT, I was at the 98.35 percentile, and premier private colleges offered me 100% scholarship. And best of all, through A-Lit, I secured a place on NLU Delhi's first merit list and decided to go for it. My life experiences, I hope, have been inspiring to at least some of you. But truth be told, I don't just want it to be about me and my story. If there's just one thing you take away from this talk and the story of my life, I'd like it to be this. People often talk a lot about the wisdom that comes with disability. It's an arduous journey with hurdles at every step. And so, like many other arduous journeys, one is liable to acquire wisdom along the way through struggle. But the truth is, we don't need this plot of adversity to make disabled personal need right. What we need are proper and functional systems and infrastructure. People must reach out, laws must be made, and rights enforced to change the present situation. As Alice Wong said in Disability Visibility, the story of disabled success has never been the story of one solitary disabled person overcoming limitation, despite the fact that that's the narrative we often read in the media. The narrative trajectory of a disabled person's life is necessarily web. We are often only as strong as our friends and family make us, only as strong as our communities, only as strong as the resources and privileges we have.